Hello, this is Chmura, welcoming you to Housing Demand, the last piece of the attraction and expansion puzzle. We're going to give you maybe just one more minute as we let a few more people come in here. Okay, let's get a head start on this now. Housing Demand, the last piece of the attraction and expansion puzzle. My name is Chmura, and I'll be your host, moderator, and one of your two speakers here this morning. So just a little bit about Chmura before we get started. We have both the Jobs EQ software side as well as our consulting side, and we're all about making sure that we give our clients what they need so that they can be successful. Our top priority is excellence. That's what drives us every day, and quality and customer service is extremely important to us as a company. Just some of the markets we serve, from corporate to economic development, education, staffing, site selection, and workforce. That's both on the consulting and the Jobs EQ side. And here are some of the organizations that use our services. Deloitte, for example, some of the top consulting firms, and then some site selectors. Newmark is an example, and some private sector firms, as well as economic and workforce development and education. Just one quick shout out. We're having a conference in Nashville between April 14th and 17th. And that's a time when you can come, whether or not you're a Jobs EQ user, and learn more about some of the top practices in terms of how to amplify opportunities in your communities or in your corporation. Some housekeeping items. We'll have this taped as well as the PowerPoint sent out to you hopefully by the end of the day, but in the next day or two. Please ask questions. And if we see them on the side, we may answer them right at that time. And otherwise, we'll try to get to as many of those questions at the end. So again, my name is Chmura, founder and CEO at Chmura Economics and Analytics. We're joined by Francesco Renna, who is our Director of Consulting, Senior Labor Economist. And he's been with us for a couple of years. Prior to that, he was in academia teaching labor economics for 20 years. But please don't hold that against him. He's very down to earth and a terrific speaker. And I think you'll enjoy his comments here today. So first, I'll be talking about the national housing trends. And then Francesco will talk to you about a recent Virginia housing study we did, and some of how, in fact, some of those studies were a foundation for the tool that we're going to show you. And then we built some additional information on it. I want to give a shout out to Sarah Dunnigan from Virginia Housing, who was very instrumental in the creative ideas behind some of the issues Virginia was having in how to identify whether there were going to be, whether there were going to be enough workers, then were there going to be enough housing, and what type of housing for the type of expansions that were happening. So thank you, Sarah Dunnigan, for the great work you did in Virginia. And then at the end, Francesco will show you how to estimate additional demand for local housing needed for business expansion. So first, on the national side. So continued economic growth supports the housing market, and that is what we're expecting. It does appear that the Fed was able to orchestrate a soft landing. The economy is continuing to grow. Here you can see GDP, the broadest indicator of economic activity. The latest date that we have is the third quarter of 2024. GDP grew an annualized 2.8%. In terms of our forecast for the fourth quarter, we're looking for a little bit slower growth, 2.3%. That would mean the entire year of 2024 comes in at 2.8%. And we are forecasting slightly slower growth in 2025 at 2.4%. So a little bit of slowing in the economy, but continued good growth. That means employment here on the left-hand side will continue to grow. And you could see that these are the total employment change per month. And the last data point is October. And we barely saw growth of 12,000. And that's because of the hurricanes and the floods that came after it that really caused a setback in terms of hiring that year. We expect to see employment rising back up to around the 100,000 level and continuing to support the economy. Again, more people working, more people needing homes. On the right-hand side, then, you see the unemployment rate. And the unemployment rate for October was 4.1%. The low was 3.4% in April of 23. And you can see that we've inched up, but nothing like a sharp increase that would suggest a real big slowdown is coming. So low unemployment rate means people feel confident to go out and purchase a home because they feel confident they're going to continue to have a job. Wages, average hourly earnings, percent change from a year ago, are rising 4% year over year right now. You can see wage growth has slowed, and that's because inflation has been coming down. Good news here is that inflation, as measured by the Personal Consumption Expenditure Index, that's the Fed's favorite measure of inflation, was up 2.1% during the latest month. So clearly, we're seeing a real increase in wages now that, again, portends well for housing activity, people making more money than can afford homes. But on the flip side, we are still seeing housing issues, and they continue to decrease economic competitiveness from a local perspective. So as we're seeing housing prices going up, this is the Case-Shiller house price index, and the latest one is showing up 5%, not as bad as the 15-20% we were seeing during the COVID period or just after COVID started, but still 5% is a pretty good year-over-year increase. And if you take the cumulative effect of what happened during COVID, it still puts housing out of reach for some people. We've also got the situation where we're seeing high borrowing costs. So we're used to, in the last 10 years, having 3% rates. 3% mortgage rates were unusual, even though some people in this audience probably have never seen anything other than 3% or the 5 to 6% we're seeing right now. But that's atypical, and we may never see that again in our lifetimes. Even for those of you who are very young, you may not see it in your lifetime. So that was due to the extraordinary effect that we saw during COVID. And lately, we've seen rates rise. The lowest rate that we saw, again, was around 3%. And right now, according to the Mortgage Bankers Association, the November 8 30-year mortgage rate was 6.9%. So it did pop up as we were going into this year. So back in start of 2024, when people or investors were looking for the Fed to cut rate 5 times this year, that did not happen. And when they realized it wasn't going to happen, we saw rates popping up. When the Fed started to cut rates, we saw, and they only affect the Federal Reserve can only affect the federal funds rate. And then we see sometimes that ripple through the economy. So then we saw the rates going up, coming down a bit again. And then more recently, starting to go up as the economy remains strong. Investors started to think that Fed is not going to lower rates as much. So in our forecast, we're looking at rates coming down from about 6.9% now to somewhere around 6.5%, but not plummeting back to 3% or even hitting 5% anytime soon. So the mortgage rates are really tied to the 10-year Treasury, so that has inflation expectations mixed in with it, as well as the risk that bankers see. When they see a lot more risk in the economy, the unemployment rates going up, they tend to hold the mortgage rates higher. So the last issue that we're working with here is the labor supply. So if you look at the orange line, that's building permits. That's when builders are getting permits to build in the future. So that's a leading indicator. Then housing starts are in blue. And you can see that housing starts are currently lower, as well as permits, than they were back in 2020 and 2021. So there's still an issue where we don't have enough supply. In some cases, regulation is part of the issue. It's hard for builders to get the building permits to go through quickly. So in some regions, it's an issue that I guess some of you could be working on with your local officials. So housing issues continue to decrease economic competitiveness, and that's on a relative sense between local areas. And you can see how much housing issues vary. If you go to this blog, it's the FHFA government site where they're looking at the 4-quarter appreciation. So in most areas where you're seeing dark blue, we're seeing prices going up. Just a few areas where we're seeing some prices coming down from a year ago. So bottom line, as we're dealing with the issues in housing, it really is a local issue. So some of you in one region may not have as many problems as in others, and especially rural areas. And that's where we first started working on this. And this is not something that the issue with supply and demand. And this is not something that has cropped up in the last 2 years, although it's become more prevalent. And Francesco might touch on that. But this is something that we saw even 12, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when we were working in some small rural areas in Southwest Virginia, and some computer IT companies were coming in, building a big IT facility, and then realizing, gosh, where are these people going to live? So with that, let me now pass it over to Francesco.
Hello, everyone, and I'm happy to be presenting this exciting tool. We got some feedback from many of you that are excited about learning about this new analytics that we can offer you. And before I jump into a live demo, I would like to give you some background of where the idea came about and how the consulting team developed this tool that now is being embedded in JobSeq. And of course, after we're done with this presentation, feel free to reach out to any of our expert salesperson to have more details about how to use this tool. So not too long ago, we completed a project for Virginia Housing, which was very illuminating in order to understand the situation of housing, not just in Virginia, but I would say for the entire country. The goal of this study was to understand, first of all, the new role that housing plays in terms of regional competitiveness through just by listening to what stakeholders had to say in a variety of focus groups. And what we learned from this experience was that really in a post-COVID new reality, housing is just a pivotal element of strategic planning for the region. In order to be competitive, to remain competitive, regions have to really think about housing as a way to attract potential employers, because employers right now are demanding the housing situation because they're concerned that they may not be able to find workers if workers cannot relocate to that region. So what we want to do is to compare what we did in that study. We compared what Virginia is doing currently versus what other reality and best practices were available for the rest of the country. And then we provide some direction, some policy recommendation about how to move forward in the next 10 years about aligning the economic development needs together with the needs of the workers that they are needed in order to develop a new project. And the big lesson that we learned from that experience is that no matter whether you are in an urban area or a regional area, or you are have access to infrastructure or not, every region is actually facing some forms of barriers. But they really change from region to region. So it's probably not a good idea to have a statewide policy because we have very individualized needs. In some regions, we found that the problem was, well, all of the problems, they boil down to one major issue: the cost of building. And so, but the way you solve that problem really changed from region to region. In some regions, the problem was that, especially the densely populated at the urban area, the issue was the availability of land. Or more and more, the lack of the workforce of construction workers was the main reason for the high cost of building. Another obstacle, another barrier that we found again in rural, mostly in urban areas, was outdated, a very old zoning and permit code. And sometimes we're talking about zoning codes that go back 100 years when the economic reality was completely different. And so the need of rethinking about zoning codes in a way that is more modern and appropriate to new even building techniques became a pressing issue in many urban areas. For rural areas, what we found that the main obstacles to lower the cost of housing was the lack of infrastructure. Some of these regions don't have major highways, so it was difficult to bring the construction material to the site. Sometimes we're missing even the basic infrastructure, such as the water or the power network. And finally, which raised the question of the important role that agencies need to engage with the localities to get the support of the local stakeholders. It was the fact that although most people, most individuals recognize the problem of housing in the United States, you don't have to really make a big case for why we need more housing. At the same time, nobody wanted the more housing to happen in their backyard. And that's where, again, engaging with the local community becomes essential to convince and to explain and to take care of the resistance that often local communities face from people that, yes, they want to have more housing, but not in their backyard. So what are some of the recommendations that came out from our study? Well, first of all, in 2024 and for the next 10 years, it is impossible to talk about economic development if housing does not become an important component of it. It is important not only that I see a question coming and I'm going to see if I can answer. I was on a S&P webcast this morning exploring some of the post-election impacts, and they quote as much as 15% of the construction worker is undocumented at risk of potential deportation upon the upcoming regime. You have a house view on this dynamic as a core potential. On the housing stock. Thank you for the question. It is yet to be determined how much this massive deportation will become effective. It's not going to be as easy as one may think. So I'm not denying the fact that it poses a new risk to the current shortage of construction workers, but at the same time, probably we should not panic because we don't know, at least as of November 19, we don't know the extent of that policy, of how much it will be implemented. But the risk is,
Yeah, I was going to just jump in, Francesco, because no surprise, Joe, we were asked that same question 4 years ago or 8 years ago when Trump was first elected. And we did an analysis along the border of Texas, and we did not find, we were only looking at it from a wage perspective. So we did not find a big jump in wages. But I think that's, thanks for raising that question. I'm going to put it on a list for something that we should dig into again. We'll have to wait maybe another quarter to start to see some data. But yeah, good question, and
that's a good question.
We'll look into it. Back to you, Francesco.
But just including this housing strategy as a pillar of economic development is not enough unless the two fields, they are aligned with each other. So we design a housing planning that is aligned with the economic needs. And that in this framework, the tool that I'm about to present you, I think is going to be very instrumental and useful in trying to align the needs of economic development with the effort to have an appropriate housing planning. Other big lessons big recommendation that we have from our study is that we need to ensure that communities have the flexibility, again, local communities, there's a lot of it at the local level, of the flexibility to use state and local dollars or grant to address some of the barriers that are, again, specific to the region, may change from one region to the other, although the common rule is that every region had some form of barriers that they were facing. And the other thing that came out is that we need collaboration among agencies. And this is where the job and economic development on the EDO becomes a bit more complicated, because in the past, EDOs and workforce place boards have had a very successful collaborations, and they help each other to grow. What we're saying is that in 2024 and beyond, it is important that at the table, not only we have economic development organizations and workforce boards, but we probably need also to include some representative from the housing agency, because the three agencies, they have to communicate with each other in order to have a cohesive plan. And finally, one of the things that we suggest is to make sure that all kind of housing data availability is there for stakeholders to have access, and so we kind of support in terms of support of transparency. But let's move to the tool that became available on JobSecure just a couple of weeks ago. We are very excited about here at Chmura. It was again developed by consulting, but now is embedded in the software. It is the backbone of that tool is a tool that already exists in JobSecure that is called the What If. Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not, so I'm going to review that one for you. And I want you to keep in mind that when we designed this tool, we had two fundamental questions that we wanted to answer. First of all, what is the projected demand needs from an expansion? But then one thing that we learned from our study on the Virginia housing is that sometimes housing is available in a region, but does not match the needs of the local individuals. So another thing that we try to address with this tool is not only recommendation in terms of how many units we need to build, but also what kind of units are needed. The most common concern that we heard from stakeholders during our engagement was that there was lack of affordable housing. But at the same time, we have heard over and over again in more than one case that the problem was the opposite, that there was not housing upscale, like on the upper end of the scale of the luxury homes, that was needed to attract actually executive for a new development. So just because you have a housing unit does not mean that you have resolved your problems. It could be that the issue is we need to have more affordable housing. It could be that the issue we actually need more luxury homes. And this tool tries to address all the two issues: how much to build and what kind of housing unit to build. Okay, so I'm gonna walk you through a live demo of our tool, and I'm gonna use something that is like super hot, super new. This is only a couple of days old, November 13. There was an announcement that a region in Southwest Virginia, Pennsylvania, just won a mega site for $1.3 billion for a battery separator. This was a big project, as you can see here, is expected to add more than 2,000 jobs to the region. In the region is Berry Hill in Pennsylvania County. And that's a lot of jobs. For that region, that is a lot of jobs. And the question is, where are we going to find the people to go and work on this job? And so I'm going to, with this and my PowerPoint, jump straight into Job Secure and walk through an analysis. Okay, so before we jump into this new tool, I would love to show you the backbone that was what we used in order to develop eventually our housing market, which is the what if. Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not. So it's good to walk through this experiment. So I'm gonna choose this. I created a region of 1 hour driving distance from the site, from the address of the site. And I'm going to choose the industry for which this new mega site, which is the name of the company's Microporous, is going to be operating, which is battery manufacturing. Okay. And as stated, they are expecting this project to add 2,015 jobs. It's going to be an expansion. So what if, tell us for this site, and it's going to take a while, but now it's ready, how many jobs are, it splits the 2015 jobs in the occupations they are needed to fill out all the positions. So for example, this project of 2,000 more people is expected to have almost 400 electrical, electronical, and electrical mechanical equipment assembler, except coil, winders, tapers, and finishers. So it goes through all the list of all the occupations. If you sum all these numbers, you're gonna get the 2015 jobs that are needed for this new project. You know, there's gonna be some marketing managers. What is relevant from these analytics within JobSecure is that it compares the expected demand associated with this expansion to the supply in the labor shed defined as 1 hour driving distance from the address of the mega site. And the labor shed is going to be made of people that currently are employed under this occupation, as well as the people that are unemployed. So the unemployed people are going to be the ones that most likely we're going to go and hire to fill out these positions. But this is the problem. We need 397 workers. There's only 67 that are available in the region. So we need to get 330 people, and those will most likely come from outside the region, however I have defined it. And later I'm going to have, if I have time, I would love to show you how important it is to define the right region, because if you define the region in the wrong way, you come up with some incorrect predictions. So we need to have 330 workers that are under the SOC code 51-2028, and that's the description of the SOC code. What is also relevant from this analytics is that we know what is the expected average salary of a typical electrical, mechanical equipment assembler, which is 41K. So we're going to use that information about the salary to design the housing demand of a typical individual that makes 41K in the specific region as 1 hour driving distance. Okay, so the what if analytics has a lot of other cool features, such as we can look at extended unemployment. Those are people that have skills very similar to the ones that we're looking at, but they're not technically within this occupation. But we could take some of these, we could hire also out of these extended unemployed people, because they can be easily trained on the skills that are needed to fill out our position. But the housing analytics does not look into this part, so I'm going to skip that part. What is important right now is we have the expected demand, we have the number of people that are currently unemployed, and we can use that information to predict how many people we need to hire from outside the region in order to fill out these 2015 jobs. Okay, so I'm going to go back now to our tools, and I see a question, and let me see the question. How do we best use short-term rental data to explain to our leadership the impact of short-term rentals on the local housing supply when properties are taking off the market for use as a short-term rental? So the short-term rental is a short-term solution, right? And also you have to keep in mind the short-term rental is not as economical as a long-term rental. So you can think of the short-term rental as a way of, in the meantime that we develop all the housing units that people are demanding, well, people can actually use that. In our model, we do separate, as I'm going to walk out through an example right now. We differentiate between ownership and rental. And a rental doesn't have to be necessarily just an apartment. A rental could be also a house that is rented, but we don't think of that rental as being an Airbnb kind of solution, because again, that's more expensive, and it is supposed to be just a short-term solution while the new stock of housing is built. I don't know, Chris, if you want to add something to my comment.
No, I think that's good, Francesco. In the meantime, I'm asking Patrick if he would have answered that differently. So he's writing back, and we'll get to that at the end.
So let's jump into the housing demand, which is again built on the analytics that I showed you. And I'm going to choose the same region, Pennsylvania, and the same the same industry, and the number of people that are supposed to be hiring. So this is, if you think about it, this is the site selection or the economic development side of this exercise. And the important part is now we're linking the economic development side, which are usually the people who use the what if scenario, to the housing component. So if we run these analytics, it takes a while, but we're going to get something. First of all, I'm going to go all the way down, and I'm going to show you that the backbone of all the analytics that I'm going to show you is based on the what if. Remember what I told you, that for SOC code 51/2028, there was a need of 330 units. Okay, so as you can see, that's what we have. This was the salary that was expected. Now, what I'm going to explain you is how we split these 330 units. They are needed for specifically this occupation. We're going to say 192 units are going to be a demand for not necessarily single home, because they could be also condo or townhomes. But let's talk about owner units, when whether it's single home, condominium, or townhomes, and 138 rental units. So let's see how we came up with that prediction. So first of all, we learned from the what if scenario that of the 2015 jobs that are needed at this new plan, 575 are going to be workers that have to come from outside the region. The region simply does not have, the labor shed simply does not have 575 jobs that are needed in order to fill out all our positions. Of these 575 individuals, they are supposed to be quote unquote imported from other regions. We're going to need to build 371 housing units and 204 rental units. And again, don't think necessarily as rental units, as most likely those will have to be apartments, but a rental unit can also be a house that an individual can rent. What we also know that the average home is going to be, the price of the average home is going to be $240,000. But this is the average. Remember, one of the things that we learned from our exercise is that there's not just one specific need. The most prevalent need is affordable housing, but at the same time, we actually sometimes have the opposite need, we have the need of actually building luxury homes. So we take this demand of 371 units and we break it down into brackets of average price level. So we need 265 units in the 170K price range. We need 37 units at a much higher level, at the $432,000. We need 27 units at the price of $287,000. And we need 26 units at almost $400,000. And finally, for the exact, we need to build housing also for the executives that are currently missing in the region. And those are, of course, they're only supposed to be 16, but we need, again, we heard from stakeholders over and over again, sometimes they have a hard time hiring executives because of the lack of housing for them. There is another question from Michael. Since housing basically doubled in value cost over the last 5 years, it feels like the only way to make housing affordable is to have a collapse in the market, which pretty much no one owns property or policymaker wants. Does America just need to become more willing to rent like other Western countries and build wealth in different ways? It truly feels like an entire generation is just priced out of the market indefinitely. Michael, I've heard that story from construction, from expert in construction, that the United States is moving toward the European market, where the concept of the starting home is being replaced by luxury apartments. I don't want to go personally into the issue of asset building and equity and the intergenerational issue of the new generation not being able to build the equity. I mean, that was the old model in the United States for sure. You get married, you get a starter home, then the family grows, and then you move to the forever home. They are, again, seems to be a shift into that model. You also have to keep in mind that the new generation, the millennial generation, does not care as much as previous generation about owning. They like to be in downtown. They're willing to live in a smaller place. So whether the shift is due to the generation that is requesting a different style of life, or whether is, as you say, the fact that they're being pushed in demanding a new style of life, and that's a big question. And don't know which way. I don't have a strong opinion one way or another. But that shift has been noted by several people. Would the owner's demand of 371 units be single family or multi-family unit? So we don't differentiate between those. Okay, the tool does not differentiate. The tool only says that there is a demand for 371 shelter, like honing shelter. There could be single home detached. There could be condominium. There could be town housing. We don't differentiate. At this point, the tool does not differentiate that one. But if you think that would be something that would be relevant, definitely we can take that as a consulting job where we go and dig out more into the details of breaking down the 370 units in the subcategories. But right now, the tool in JobSeeker is silent about that part. It only tells you there's 371 units that need to be built for ownership. We have the graph of the region. What is very important about the region is that the location of this plan, of this mega site, is literally on the border, almost on the, it is literally on the border on the Virginia side, but on the border with North Carolina. And as you can see, the labor shed really draws from the North Carolina market, with major cities like Greensboro being a big feeder of potential workers that they're going to commute to this mega site, which is just outside Danville. One thing that is important is from this tool that you can use as a marketing campaign to attract firms, and that you can show, hey, look, if you look at income, the housing price to income ratio, this region is more affordable than the rest of the country, because in this region the ratio is 3.1, while in the country, the average in the country is 3.75, which means that housing in this region is overall more affordable than housing in the rest of the country. So that could be used as a tool to attract both potential employers, but at the same time also potential workers, because they're attracted by the fact that housing is more affordable in the region. So we said 370 owner demand and 204 unit demand. We broke down the 370 units in 5 brackets for expected price for the house. We also break it down into monthly budgets. And the advantage of doing that one is that when we break it down as a monthly cost, we can actually separate it. We can also do the analysis also for rental, not just for ownership. And let's start from rental, because that's the easiest part. We use the rule of the well-known rule of the recommendation that your housing expenses should never be more than 30% of your salary. And so we use that rule, and because we have from the what if tool, we have the information about the salaries of all the workers that we need to hire from outside the region. We can derive the demand, and we say, well, we need 190 units, which are in the price between 1,000 and 1,500. We need 7 units, which are in the price range of 1,500 and 2,000, and then they become more luxurious properties that we need to build, although they're limited. 3 units are expected to be above 2,000, but less than 2,500, and 2 units between 2,500 and 3,000. The same is done for the estimated monthly budget for ownership, which is used to then derive the actual cost of the house, of the price for the house. It's a bit more complicated. We go through a variety of steps. First of all, we need to know what is the current mortgage rate. And FYI, this model is actually updated every 3 months, every quarter, because the monthly mortgage rates can change from month to month. So this analysis may actually change 3 months from now. So we look at what is the current mortgage rates. We also take into the consideration what is the likely credit score of the applicants for the mortgage, right? How do we know that when we know the wages of the individuals? We know that there is a relationship between credit score and the wages. We use that relationship to estimate what is the likely credit score. And so we know what would be the rate that would be given to that individual. And then we come out with a well-accepted rule in the sector that the debt to income ratio should be about 28% of the income. And using these 3 rules, we derive these 5 categories of 265 individual unit should imply a monthly budget, which includes mortgage rates and the escrow of 1,000 to 1,500, 27 units between 1,500 and 2,000, and so on and so forth, and 16 units, they can go for $3,000 or more per month. What else is here? Finally, in our report, we give some basic background information about the region. There are 600,000 units. They are in the region. The median value of a house in this region is $194,500. So that is a little bit lower than what is needed to build. So we need to build at a higher level than currently is available in the region. What is that telling us? That's telling us that most likely the stock of the house currently available in the region is old, which raises another issue that we don't just need to build, just having a housing available in the region is not enough because people are demanding newer homes, and probably the stock of housing in this region is old, and that's reflected by a lower wage in the region. There is a question from Patrick. Oh no, Patrick answered to Raji. So let me first of all answer. Read. There's a lot of questions.
So, yeah. Francesco, if you're at the end.
Yes, I am at the end, and then I'll take all the questions. Maybe let's do that. Yes.
All right.
So,
go ahead.
So this is basic information. Tell us the vacancy rate is 1.1% to take into account, and then 33% of the people are renting, and 66% of the people are owning. And we use that information to derive the split between ownership and rental. So there's a lot of questions. I'd rather stop here and maybe answer the questions, and then let's see. I'm going to start with. Wow, there's a lot of questions.
Okay, so Francesco, to help you out, I asked Patrick to answer Raji, but while you're looking at the questions, let me answer one that James answered a bit ago, or asked a bit ago. And he asked, when you went to the what if report, the last column is color coded. That's potential to the potential workers relative to what they need. So that is a very important column. So the what if report, the whole purpose of that report is to show the expanding firm whether they will have the workers in your region that are needed for the expansion to be successful. So in that very last column of potential candidates per opening, expanding firms and site selectors have told us we like to see 50 people, employed or unemployed, for every one we're trying to hire in that particular occupation. So if that's not green, that means we don't have enough workers. If it's red, we're really short. If it's orange, it's halfway in between. And that's why we have that third last column, the employment extended. So in the first column, for example, we have 457 people who are working in alternative occupations that we could train to go into that occupation. Or if we clicked on one of the blue areas like that have degree levels, electrical engineer, for example, we see under the occupations what schooling is required, and are there any community colleges or colleges in the region graduating students, and that tells us we have a pipeline of workers to provide going into the future. So hopefully that answered your question on that. And Francesco, I'll let you answer all the other hard.
Yes, let me add a question. Since housing basically double, no, I already answered to that one. Corey, it seems like the tool does differentiate 371 owners unit and 240 rental, apartment or rental home. So again, we don't differentiate between the two of them. If you need to have that kind of information, if that information is relevant to you, that would be more a custom consulting service that would have to be conducted, because then we need to look at what is available in the house in terms of rental. Typically, builders don't build a single detached home for rental purposes, right? Usually the rental of a house is more like you inherited an apartment from grandma, own a house from grandma, and you don't want to sell it, but you don't want to move in either. So we use it as a rental property in the meantime. I was
going to say, Francesco, as you're looking at the other questions, let me just, and you've already shown this to some degree, but let me emphasize the practical ways that you can use the housing report. You could show this information to home builders or investors to let them know we have these firms that are coming in or that are expected to expand, and here's how many houses, here's how many rental units that we're going to need. That will encourage them to build. You can give this to the local officials to help them see that they need to maybe change regulations. They need to change zoning laws so that you can get things built a lot quicker to support your expanding economy. And if you're in economic development, you may want to consider your housing stock and available land to suggest the target industries that you're going after. If you don't have much available land, then a mega industrial site is probably not a good option for you. And maybe you should be going after data centers that employ less people, or maybe warehouses. So again, consider the amount of space that you have for residential building relative to the targets that you're targeting.
And I'm going to answer too quickly to Jennifer. Yes, Housing Demand is a new tool together with Talent Watch. And if you want to have more information about Talent Watch, by all means, reach out to one of our sales representatives, and they will help you. They'll be glad to walk you through that new tool. One very quick thing that I would like to point out is about how important it is to define the right labor shed, which I know is important because somebody asked about what about if you include in the analysis the fact that Toyota battery plants, which is 45 miles away from Greensboro, also plan to hire a lot of workers. Well, one may be conservative and look at only the Danville region, but be careful because if you use only the immediate county around the site, then because that's a very rural area, you would come up with the conclusion that you need to build almost 1,600 housing units, which may be an oversupply of housing that you would have to end up building. Because most of the people, some people are willing to commute 1 hour, so you have to keep that in consideration. So if you don't know how to create a custom region, by all means, reach out to Chmura. We'll help you to define a more appropriate way to define a labor shed. We think that usually 1 hour driving time is the best way to define a labor shed. Of course, it runs into the issue that you capture Greensboro, which is probably going to serve also other projects that are going on right now in North Carolina, but you can customize your region to 45 minutes drive, 30 minutes drive, whatever you think is the most appropriate definition of labor shed for your market. Brandy, when the data is updated every 3 months, does your model take into account the loss of homes, be it no homes that demolished? And Brandy, quickly, this is a labor demand, is not a labor supply. Okay, so we only estimate the demand. It is the job of the agency also to compare how much demand is needed compared to what is available. This is not an equilibrium model; it's just the demand side. So it does not take into account of the demand, of the supply, of the stocking, of the stock of housing. Chuck Pearson, is there a feature on JobSecure that indicates whether a region is building enough housing to keep up with population change? So right now, that's a very good question, Chuck. Right now, our tool is intrinsically tied to the site selection and the project expansion. Of course, especially during the last 4 years where immigration was an issue for many regions, one may think about, okay, can we modify this model to look at other shocks of population growth and changes that are not tied to a site selection? I'm going to say that the best way to answer to that kind of question would be more a custom consulting service more than using JobSecure. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes. So many years ago, when I was working on some of this for in a banking industry, Crestar, then SunTrust, and Truist, we used to look at the population to employment. The employment to permit ratio, and using employment because it changes monthly, not population because it only changes annually and it lags more. And there's a certain long-term sort of equilibrium that would help us out in terms of seeing whether there's a supply excess or deficit. And that's something that let me talk to our team of consultants and about putting some tests together and perhaps adding that to this analytic. And I think it would help you at least see the supply and demand in one view historically over time. It's a good question. Thanks.
Yeah, and the other thing that I can add to that one is our estimation of our tool that estimates for each expansion, how many occupation, many new jobs are needed. It's pretty flexible. You can go and you can change that. So if you have some ideas of this population, the drivers of this population change, so how many people are coming with specific skill set, you can actually create your own event, which is actually not tied to a specific company moving in, but general population growth. If you know the demographic of the people that are coming, what is their occupation, and so on and so forth. So you could use, I think the tool could be flexible enough to be able to predict the demand for housing due population change. The last one is Matthew, but Chris, I don't know the answer to that one.
Yes, so Matthew, you're right. This is an add-on. And so if you get with your customer service rep, they can give you what that is. Okay.
Okay. Is there any question? We have short of 4 more minutes. Let's see. Did I miss any question?
I think you've caught them all, Francesco. So everyone, thank you again for attending. Like I said, this tape and the slides will be available either today or next couple of days at the latest. And also, just a reminder for those of you, we have a weekly economic update. Since there's so much change going on in the economy, it's free to anyone. If you go to the bottom of our first page, you can sign up and you get it every weekend. Again, it's complimentary to help you see what's going on with interest rates, what's going on with the Fed, and the economy in general. So thank you again, everyone, for participating. And please reach out to us as you have other ideas of what you'd like to hear about in our webinars. Thanks. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.